Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll talk to some of the folks behind Florence-based Self-Evident Education's Power of Truths, Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance. There's a screening in Northampton tomorrow night.
Plus, Pizza Quest returns as we review Berkshire Mountain Pizza Cafe and Bakery in Pittsfield, such a long name, while on the hunt for the best pizza in the 413.
But first...
And you didn't write down any puns, right?
No. They won't happen naturally, so if you were looking for a little bit of that action, I'm going to disappoint you so badly.
This is the Monty relief.
As soothing as the honey we will be tasting later. Welcome to another Local Hero Spotlight, here with CISA, the Buy Local folks. Today we're speaking with Dick Connor of Red Barn Honey Company in Northampton. Now, full disclosure, I used to buy this honey all the time at the market down the street from my house so I could pick it up on my way back home from work. What's bee life like in the winter?
Oh, bee life
for all of us who have forgotten.
In the winter, okay. Well, honeybees are pretty quiet in the winter. There's not much activity in the hive. Well, not much that you can see. The bees, some people refer to it as hibernating. I'm not a biologist, but it's not technically hibernating. The bees go into kind of a state of torpor and they form a cluster. So they share their body heat, and the bees produce heat by vibrating their wing muscles. Okay, so they're using honey, which is a carbohydrate, so that's kind of like their fuel source. Think of that as their fuel source for the winter to keep the colony warm. So honeybees consume honey, vibrate their wing muscles, produce heat, and in that cluster, and the bees kind of rotate. So the ones on the outside of the cluster gradually move to the center, and the ones in the middle who are warmer move back out. So yeah, that's what they do to make it through the winter.
So if the bees need honey in the winter or fuel, is there a time that you stop taking the honey from the hives?
Yeah, sure. So it's important for beekeepers who are harvesting honey to make sure that they leave enough for the bees at the end of the season. Our last harvest is in October. So the last time we process honey, we're taking that honey off end of September, early October. And we'll check to make sure that the colony is heavy enough, that the bees have enough honey to survive through the winter. If they don't, then we'll do some supplemental feeding. We'll feed them sugar syrup so that it's not too thin, so there's not adding too much moisture to the hive, and the bees will store that in the comb as a substitute for honey. There are various times throughout the season when beekeepers might feed bees. If you're feeding in the spring for a colony expansion and there's not much nectar available for them yet, you'll feed a thinner syrup. It's a 1-to-1 sugar syrup. In the fall, we feed a 2-to-1 syrup.
So one great thing about local honey is that you actually have your beehives on farms in the local area. So how does that work in the winter, since we're focusing on that? Do you recollect the beehives, or they stay out in the field?
No, we leave the bees where they are in the field. We do move bees around a little bit in the summertime. We have done some pollination in the valley for farmers that are growing crops that rely on pollinators, so we'll move the bees for that purpose, then move them back to the bee yards where we keep them. But the locations where we have bees right now, we have bees in 9 locations up and down the valley, from Montague to Granby and in between. We add some insulation to the hives to give them a little bit of added R value to stay warm in the winter, so we put a piece of insulation up on top of the hive underneath the outer cover.
Did those farmers contact you about bringing bees onto the farm and keeping them there, or was it the other way around?
It's mostly the other way around. In some cases, there's some mutual benefit for the farmers, depending on what they're growing. We have bees at Park Hill Orchard in East Hampton, for example, and they're a fruit farm, obviously, so most of what they grow relies on pollinators. So if they did not have me keeping bees there, chances are they would be hiring in beekeepers to hiring in hives, essentially renting hives for pollination during the bloom period. But we keep bees there and we leave them there year-round. And they're, by the way, great collaborators. They sell our honey at their farm stand through the season.
So I have to hear your origin story of how you ended up being a beekeeper.
Well, I've always been interested in nature and the outdoors, and a friend of mine, it's probably 18 or 20 years ago now, who was keeping bees, introduced me to it, and I said, oh, that's really cool. I should try that. I'd like to try keeping bees as a hobby. So I started a colony in our backyard. We live kind of close to downtown Northampton, so we really don't have much space, but you don't need a lot of space if you only have 1 or 2 hives. So I did it as a hobby for a number of years, and then about 13 years ago, ago, decided to make a life career change and sort of stepped out of the work that I was doing and decided to build this into a sideline business while I was caring for my kids.
Are you keeping bees at your place in Northampton too? Do you keep that honey separate from the stuff you're getting from orchards?
No, I don't have any bees at our home right now. All my bees are on what beekeepers refer to as out yards, so they're out away from the farm. We rent some shop space in Northampton where we process our honey. And I guess I would say to you that, and to the audience, that the plants that bees prefer to collect nectar from are pretty consistent throughout the area, and for that matter, New England and the Northeast. Bees are much more particular about the types of plants that they gather nectar and pollen from than people realize.
What's the hardest thing about keeping bee populations healthy?
Well,
And is it harder than keeping children healthy?
Or, other pets. I keep thinking of bees as like one puppy that has, like 5,000 parts and you can't pet very
I guess
easily.
my answer could apply to both bees and children. I don't know whether benign neglect is better than all the management that we try to do. No, in all seriousness, the health issue of honeybees is multifactorial. It's a fairly complicated issue. One of the big central issues, however, is a parasitic mite that infests honeybee colonies. It jumped from another species of bee, what's referred to as Asian honeybee, to the European honeybee, and its former host tolerates the mites pretty well, but the European honeybees do not. So that's the central issue in terms of health. It's not the only issue, but it's the central issue in terms of keeping your honeybee colonies healthy and alive. So beekeepers really need to monitor their mite levels in their colonies, and if they get too high, do something about it in terms of some sort of treatment to knock the mites back down, or else the colony will eventually succumb from them. You mentioned the word terroir and what honey is like in terms of color and taste, and I brought some samples here with me.
Yay,
samples! You want to try them here in the studio?
Yes. You brought honeycomb too.
Yeah, we're
not going to crack it open.
Phil,
but...
it's kind of silly to bring a visual prop to a radio interview, but it gives you something to take off on. Yeah.
Most of what honeycomb looks like, but what are some of the benefits of getting and using the whole honeycomb?
Honey that's in a comb, referred to as comb honey, well, it's the least processed form of honey that you can consume, unless, of course, you're keeping your own honeybee colony and you're opening it up and, taking out a piece of comb or sticking your finger in there and tasting the honey. This is the least processed form of honey that you could purchase or to taste. So it's still in the comb where the honeybees stored it. The waxy surface that you can see is a wax capping. We refer to it as a capping that covers the cells filled with honey. When the bees know that the moisture content is at the right level, they cap it off, so that's the way they store it. Yeah, it's not as versatile product as liquid honey because it's obviously still in the comb, so if you put that in your tea, you can have melted wax floating around.
But then you could light it.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, light your tea, flaming tea. So I like to eat it, spreading it on an English muffin or toast or something like that, and then the wax kind of blends in with the bread that you're eating. It's the wax kind of sticks in your teeth a little bit, but it's a really kind of a neat product, I think.
So we're in this cold season, right? Where it's like raining out or almost snowing, whatever, and I know that a lot of people really gravitate to honey in terms of the winter season and gift giving, but also in terms of just feeling healthier, whether you're under the weather or not. Can you share a little bit about how people you sell to use your honey? And
Well, sure. A lot of people will use it in sort of medicinal purposes as well as a nice sweet treat. Honey is naturally antibiotic, so it not only soothes your throat when you have a sore throat or a cough, but it actually helps cure the infection. As your body breaks down the honey, there's a little bit of antibiotic property that's released, so it actually helps kill the infection. A lot of people swear by it in terms of helping their allergies. What I've read about that is that it's the kind of thing where you have to eat a little bit of honey every day in advance of and during the allergy season. It's not like taking an antihistamine that's going to have an immediate effect. But yeah.
And that leads us to something else, which is that local honey is usually processed differently than the national big brand commercial honey. Can you talk a little bit about the packing of the honey?
Sure. Well, we process it as little as possible, but we use mostly cold processes when we process our honey. So we remove the cappings from the comb, use a centrifuge type of device that spins the honey out of the combs. We then cold strain it and then package it in containers. Low processed honey will granulate in the container, however you're storing it eventually. We will warm our honey gradually and slowly in a controlled way so that it keeps it under a certain temperature. When it granulates in the containers, we store it in and then package it. Heating to a really high temperature and or pressure filtering the honey will remove some of the distinct flavors of the honey and compromise the nutritional value to some extent. So that's why we try to process it as minimally as possible.
Yeah. Okay, you know what? We're going to come back to talking about the other products that you do, Dick Connor of Red Barn Honey Company. Right now, we're going to taste your honey because I'm selfish and I want to eat honey.
All right, well, let's do it like wine. We'll taste the light honey first. So we produce 2 seasonal varietals. The light honey that you see here is a spring wildflower is what we call it. So the bees are producing it in the spring, in May and June. The other honey is a late summer honey. We call it summer wildflower, and the bees are producing that late August through September. So let's try the light honey first. Let's try to do this without getting it all over your equipment here.
I get to use adjectives I don't use normally during everyday life.
Yeah, well, I want to hear your folks' descriptions and see if it matches what I tell my customers.
It tastes a little green, like early spring flowers. It tastes like apple blossoms.
The kinds of blossoms that bees like to forage on in the spring begin with dandelions and fruit bloom. Then there's black locust, sumac, clover, basswood. Very general rule with honey is darker honeys tend to have a deeper, more robust flavor. But that doesn't tell the whole story. So it's a little bit like maple syrup, right? Darker maple syrup is a little more robust. And I love maple syrup too, but to me, maple all tastes like maple. It's either lighter or more robust kind of flavor. Darker honeys can vary quite a bit. It all has to do with the plant source, right? Different plants produce different honeys, different things blooming around here in May and June than there is in August and September. All right, so let's try the dark honey. I'm shocked we haven't gotten it all over the table.
You'll ruin the magic. Oh.
I already know that Phil prefers dark honey.
I do too, actually.
I mean, there's just a deeper resonance with the darker for me. And I really like the lighter honey too. And there were more notes in that lighter honey than I thought, depending on what part of my mouth was tasting it. But the darker one just is more like a hum.
The darker one tastes like wine and blueberries. There's a richness to it, in no small part because it's got some of those like extra fruiting things that like darker flowers in the summer.
So there are some dark honeys. Some of my customers will ask for buckwheat honey, which is very robust. It's kind of earthy and pungent. Frankly, it's personally not my favorite honey, but some people really, really look for it. To me, it's the kind of honey that if you cook with, make a honey cake or something like that, it'd be really nice. But it's very, very strong.
It's because it tastes like grain already. Honey really does taste like the stuff that it was pulled from. So buckwheat honey tastes like earth and grain to me when I have it. So that makes a lot of sense. Honey's not all that you do, and not combs either. You also sell beeswax.
Beeswax is a product that we produce. It's a byproduct of producing the liquid honey. So you end up with these cappings that's mixed in with a little bit of honey, the stuff that the bees use in the hive called propolis, a few dead bees here and there, that kind of thing. So it's a bit of work, but you render the wax, which is essentially putting it in boiling water so that all these things kind of separate, and then tapping off the clean wax, and then sometimes melting it again and straining it and making candles. So that's been a nice kind of value-added product for us at our retail sales outlets, which are farmers markets. Right now we're at the Northampton Winter Farmers Market, which is every other week at the Senior Center in Northampton, and then we sell at the Tuesday Market in Northampton during the spring, summer, and fall, both of which are managed by Grow Food Northampton. So anyway, that's been a nice product that we've added to our array of things that we offer to people. It's a clean burning candle compared to paraffin, which is a petroleum product, and it's beautiful smelling.
So for climate change this holiday season, get your bee wax candles.
There you go. Yeah.
We're talking with Dick Connor of Red Barn Honey Company in Northampton. You mentioned propolis.
Yeah.
It's another thing that you sell, but what is propolis? What do you use it for?
So propolis is a substance that the bees create by gathering resin from the buds of certain types of plants. They mix that with a little bit of wax, and it produces this resinous, sticky substance. It's sticky when it's warm. When it gets very cold, it gets very brittle and hard. And the antibiotic properties of that are even higher than the honey itself. So when a honeybee colony swarms and takes up a new residence, okay, that's how honeybee colonies reproduce, is casting a swarm. When they take up residence in a new space, a hollow tree or something like that, the first thing they do is coat the inside of it with propolis. It's sort of like disinfecting the space that they're going to use for their home. Bees will fill all the cracks and all the empty spaces in the hive with propolis that they're not filling with wax and using for space themselves to move around. So you end up with a lot of this stuff on your equipment, which once in a while it's helpful to clean off just so that you can reuse the equipment. So we will sell that to some of the herbalists in the area that are using that and some of the products that they produce, and then sell to folks. Yeah.
I am curious about swarming now.
It's a scary word, right? Swarm. A swarm of bees.
Usually when people mention swarms and they're not beekeepers, there's like running involved and often stings and bad decisions.
So swarming's an interesting phenomena, but beekeepers will often refer to the colony of bees as a superorganism, right? Because they're social insects. They work in a cooperative manner in the hive. So their way of reproducing this superorganism, this colony, creating new colonies of bees, is to swarm. So that's really their goal in the spring, the bees, is to build up their colony to a larger size and cast off a swarm, meaning that the mated queen leaves with a number of young worker bees, finds a new residence to start a new colony, and they leave behind some queen cells that then hatch. One of them hatches and kills her sisters and goes on and stings all the other queen cells in the colony. Then she goes out and mates on mating flights with drones in the area and perpetuates that original colony. Typically, a swarm is pretty docile. There are always exceptions to these rules that beekeepers have. The one rule with a swarm is, they're not going to sting you. You really don't need a lot of protection. Well, I've gotten stung many times by collecting swarms, so it does happen. But they're generally not defensive because the swarm no longer has a colony that they're defending. As soon as that swarm leaves the hive, and typically they'll hang in a temporary location for either a number of hours or sometimes a number of days until scout bees that they send out find a suitable space for a new colony. And so when they're hanging there, they're not defensive. They don't really have a colony that they're defending. They're also very young worker bees, and they've engorged with honey when they leave the hive, so that they have some resources with them. So the honeybees have a little bit harder time stinging you because they're filled with honey.
We talked a little bit about what bee life is like in the winter, but for you who are harvesting their product, what is winter like for you outside of the farmers markets that we can see you at?
Yeah, well, winter you're tired because it's been a long season. And still sell at farmers markets, so they're either weekly or every other week sales. We sell to a few other local stores, Cornucopia in Northampton, River Valley Market in East Hampton. We sell a lot to the farms where we keep bees, so I try to prioritize that because we have this mutual relationship with the farmers. So we sell honey, as we mentioned, at Park Hill Orchard, Crimson and Clover Farm, Red Fire Farm. This is the time of year when beekeepers will be making their purchases of bees for next season. We spend a lot of time cleaning and repairing equipment, both the equipment that we use to extract honey. We'll do repairs on that. Yeah, October's very busy because we're trying to do final management tasks before winter, and we're harvesting honey. So harvesting means not only bringing the honey into our shop, but then getting it out of the combs.
So I'm curious, Dick, you're actually doing both. You're selling wholesale, and then you're standing there at a farmer's market for 4 hours. What inspires that on your part?
Well, I like being at farmers markets because I get to interact directly with the customers. So anytime anybody buys something directly from a farmer, that's to the greatest benefit of the farmer.
And the markets you're at all accommodate households who are using SNAP.
That's correct. You know, it's enabled us to establish a brand identity, I think.
Thanks so much, Dick Connor of Red Barn Honey Company in Northampton and Phil Corman from CISA, the local food folks. You can find out more about all of our local heroes at buylocalfood.org.
Sure, glad to be here. Thanks.
Later in the show, some of the folks behind Self-Evident Education's Power of Truth, Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance, screening in Northampton tomorrow night.
And now we Pizza Quest once again as Volume 7 tests the slices at Berkshire Mountain Pizza Cafe and Bakery in Pittsfield.
Eaten in the backseat of my minivan with a baby.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. No, that is not euphemism.
We love to come and drink wine at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox, but it's Pizza Quest time. And Mary Dare, you have some background information on the place. We're about to go eat pizza.
We do indeed. So you guys are headed to Berkshire Mountain Bakery's Cafe in Pittsfield, where the crust is made by Richard, who's the gentleman, you know, the genius behind the brand of Berkshire Mountain bread. So sourdough king, essentially. Where you're headed in Pittsfield, though, there's an amazing female chef, Ora Whitman, who runs the cafe. And so she's putting out soups and sandwiches and all of her amazing menu items. And so she crafts all the toppings onto the pizzas. So she works with his base, and she works for Pizza Magic. Her team works for Pizza Magic in the kitchen. So it's really the combining of two really great culinary forces.
Oh, nice. Is it BYOB? Because we could buy a bottle of wine and bring it.
Oh, I
What do
wish
you
it
mean we
was.
could? What do you mean we could? We are.
Try. I don't know. I think it used to be. I'm not sure if she's doing it anymore.
It's always
We'll
BYOB.
find out. Pizza Quest.
Whoa! All right, Ryan, let's climb in on the inside. Yeah, we can do this. Whoa!
This is going to be one of the weirder interviews we've ever done.
We're gonna put the pizzas on the center console.
It is Pizza Quest. It is our semi-regular attempt to find the greatest pizza in all of the 413. You're in the backseat of my minivan with our director, Tony Dunn, and his now 2-year-old Ryan. Oh, buddy. Do you want to have some pizza? Here. Oh, you want to come up?
Because it's cold.
It's a chilly day in the Berkshires, and we're in front of Berkshire Mountain Bakery, Pizza, and Cafe.
Your car is too advanced.
It used to do it on its own. There we go.
It does. It does it on its own. Oh, the button is here. Your car is too advanced. I drive a stick still.
I wish I did.
Mama's working.
Ryan loves pizza, cheese pizza, and cheese is one of the pizzas we have to get in Pizza Quest, as is mushroom and pepperoni.
Yes.
And we are eating it in the backseat of my car because Berkshire Mountain Bakery Pizza Cafe used to be a cafe that you could eat at pre-Panny, but no longer is. However, it comes highly recommended by Mary Dare and others. I'm going to stop talking in my radio voice, which is just an over-enunciated, regular, louder Monty voice, because I think it's freaking Ryan out. Let's figure out how to dig in. This
Okay.
car is already a mess because this is where my kids spend
We're
most
sorry,
of their time.
Melissa.
Whoa, pizza.
It is hot.
It is
very,
hot.
very wise,
Okay,
Ryan.
let's
Very wise.
start with the cheese. We'll go underneath. The first one that popped up was the pepperoni and mushroom one, but let's go to the cheese because that one I think Ryan is far more interested in participating in, and we're all about placating babies right now.
Yep. Whoa, that's a nice looking. It's a roof of cheese, but it's a roof of what looks like the kind of fresh mozzarella. Fresh
for
mozzarella
sure.
roof of
Or at
cheese.
least a drier mozzarella.
This is a sourdough crust. So this is, I don't think we've had one in Pizza Quest thus far, have we?
I think maybe Magpie's a
Magpies!
sourdough crust. Yep. Here's some plates that I got from in there.
Thank you. I have the rest of these plates.
Oh yeah, because
so
some of them blew away.
Ryan just cast aside her binky.
that's because pizza's coming.
Pizza
She knows
time.
what's
Because
up.
she knows. She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
She knows what's up.
I read an article that was on the wall in there
Excuse me.
that the chef who created this went both to CIA and to Cordon Bleu. So this
Oh.
is like a real chef.
This pizza has pedigree.
Yeah, she cooked for Julia Child.
Julia Child presents The Chicken Sisters.
Too hot? Dangerous hot?
I mean,
level?
it's dangerous hot.
Okay.
Ryan's blowing on it.
We gotta blow on it. This is the worst part waiting, Ryan, right? Show me how you blow on it. Oh my god, that was the cutest thing that's happened to me in a long time.
You've been dying to hang out with this baby for so long.
No, I usually only see you on
Dreams
Zoom
come true.
calls.
Thanks, Director Tony.
Hey, happy to have her.
Oh, wow.
She's a pizza aficionado.
Yeah, you can join our regular. You can come to all of our pizza quests, Ryan.
What's up, Ryan? You want to eat it?
Yeah, me too. We'll let Khalees burn herself first, and then we'll.
No, these are cooled off pieces of cheese. You can eat the cheese. It's
All right,
the whole-
I'm gonna do that.
That's what I'm doing. Cheese is quality.
Yeah, I like the cheese a lot.
It looks like it's more Neapolitan style where we're getting a little bit of flop, but the crust itself, like towards the edge, has a lot of structure, which is cool.
There is
The sauce is nice.
not so much leoparding on the back, on the bottom of the pizza, so it doesn't have the char marks, but that's okay.
It's a very thin crust.
Yeah.
Almost cracker-like. Oh yeah, look at somebody's a fan.
There's more structure in the bite than there is in the holding.
Yeah,
That's tasty. That's wicked tasty.
The sauce is really nice. Subtle, not too much oregano or anything.
Nope, but really intensely tomato-y, which is good. And if you're into pulls, this pulls.
Elaborate.
Like a cheese pull, like a classic, like the cheese pulls, like a string cheese thing.
If you're into that being a part of your pizza, this cheese pulls. This is really good. I don't see why your wife doesn't think this is real pizza.
My wife has very specific rules and is an aficionado of New York style pizza, and anything outside of that does not exist in her world.
Outside of the thinness of the crust, this is pretty far from standard New York style pizza. But like on flavor and pizza points, this gets real high marks. Like this is real good.
What do you think, Ryan? Is it yummy?
Ryan thinks it's yummy. Me too.
You gotta move to the other pizza.
Pizza Quest has 2 rules. One is cheese, and the other is pepperoni and mushroom. I guess those aren't rules. Those are
These are our
pies.
controls.
It's an experiment. Right. It's a scientific experiment, so you need a control.
It's like trying everybody's vanilla. You need to know what the base ice cream tastes like before you start adding things on top of it to know if they're hiding things or like if their base has good quality. So like we do cheese and then we do 2 toppings that are kind of standard. One is contentious, but we like it, so we're going with it. Fresh mushrooms, by the way.
not canned mushrooms,
Not
it
canned
appears.
mushrooms.
Pepperoni, not really cupping, although a couple of evidences of some cupped pepperonis around the edges.
But with the type of cheese and the way that it melts on this, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ryan?
Do you like pepperoni, Ryan? Me too. My one critique so far is not easy to eat with one hand in the back seat of a minivan in a strip mall parking lot in Pittsfield.
But I would say those are extenuating circumstances for any Pizza Quest. Like, if we had done this with any...
This is the new control. They're all going to be eaten in the back seat of this car, no matter what the weather.
You know what? I'm for it. On the topping pizza, we're not getting as much of that crunch, as much of that structure to the crust as we were with the cheese. Still good. Like, the toppings are good. Honestly, they seem kind of unnecessary.
I know. I actually like the cheese better myself.
Yeah, I like the cheese better. I don't think I've ever had a pizza pull this much.
When I was a kid, I'd get extra cheese on a pizza, and then that would definitely do it.
But this is basic, and it's just sort of like, it is almost cartoonish how this cheese pulls.
There's your mushroom, Ryan. Did you like it? Does it taste good?
It's a very good pie, but I don't think it needs no decoration, which I don't think has been true of almost any other pie we've had. Like, it's better in its basic form.
Khalees, Ryan is trying to show you her mushroom.
Oh, show me your mushroom.
That's a cool mushroom. Ryan, what's your vote? Which pizza do you like best? The cheese or the pepperoni one?
Pony.
The Roni? Ryan votes Roni.
I'm not done with this slice. I'm not done with this slice, and I'm trying to judge already. Where do you feel like this falls? Oh, nice. In the wide array of things that we've tasted.
I still think Magpie is the winner of the places we've been. With a close second, also in the Berkshires, Bohema. There's Joe's, which is great in Northampton in its own way.
It is its own thing.
This pizza is in a different category than Joe's, but doesn't quite transcend the heights of Magpie. I think it may be somewhere in between or near Bohema.
I think it at least pairs with Bohema.
So maybe tied for second right now.
The 2 Berkshire pizzas tied for second?
Yeah, I think so. And Franklin in first. So far, no Hampshire or Hampden County in the top tier.
Well, also, we've only tried one Hampshire County place.
That's true. Joe's wins Hall of Fame status for reasons that include how good the pizza is. No slack there, but I'm definitely having another pepperoni and mushroom, even though I said the cheese is better. It's also the one on top, as we 4 human beings or 3 human beings and a half human being are crammed in the back seat of my minivan.
And again, like, I don't think I've ever had cheese pulls like I'm having on this pizza, like, ever before in my life.
Khalees loves the cheese pulls. It's like a new Olympic event.
It's a novel thing for me. It's just sort of like, oh wow, cheese does actually do this thing that I've seen people draw. The pull! The pull is too strong!
What's up,
The
sweet?
gravitational force of cheese.
Grabbing life by the reins.
Berkshire Mountain Bakery Pizza and Cafe, Pittsfield.
But don't forget you have to take it home. Don't be like us and eat in your car, unless you wanna. Your windows are all fogged up.
I know, everybody's gonna wonder what we're doing in here.
They think it's drugs because we're right outside the dispensary. As long as they didn't see the baby come in here.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that.
You can also check out Berkshire Mountain Pizza Cafe and Bakery for yourself in Pittsfield. I can vouch for their take-home pizza crust also.
If you've got a suggestion as to where the best pizza in the 413 is, we would love to hear about it and talk about it. You can email us at thefab413@nepm.org.
We'll put it in the chart. It's all scientific and everything. Time to talk with Michael Lawrence Riddell and Khalif Neville, both involved with Self-Evident Education's film The Power of Truth, Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance, screening tomorrow at Smith College in Northampton.
They're coming up next. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalif Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Florence, Mass-based Self-Evident Education presents The Power of Truths, Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance, a free film screening and discussion tomorrow, Tuesday, December 5th, from 5:30 to 7 in the Carroll Room at the Smith College Campus Center.
The evening will feature the screening of 2 short documentary films. If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die, about Ellen and William Craft's journey of self-emancipation from Georgia to Boston and beyond, and A Mother's Bond, the story of Catherine Linda, an enslaved woman who was brought by her enslavers to Northampton in 1845, where she learned she could obtain her freedom in Massachusetts. Both films were produced by Self-Evident Education.
And joining us is Michael Lawrence Riddell, Mr. LR, Executive Director for Self-Evident Education, a digital humanities resource for educators of American history who want to think critically about the role of race and institutional racism throughout U.S. history.
We're also joined by Khalif Neville, co-writer, videographer, and the composer for the film If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Khalif, last time you were here, it was on top of a double-decker bus on Fort Street in the excruciating heat of the summer. So I'm glad that we're in more temperate circumstances indoors now.
It's a little cold for me because I'm from New Orleans, but
Yeah.
I'll make it.
I'm not from New Orleans, and it's cold for me. Although you were helpful in my very first trip to New Orleans. I was texting you on the plane.
Yep, I'm glad you did. I hope you hit the spots.
I tried to. And, of course, Khalif Neville is from the famous Neville family of New Orleans.
Indeed.
Yes. Mr. LR.
Yes, sir.
Michael Lawrence Riddell. If people aren't familiar with Self-Evident Education, give us a little background of where this idea came from.
Yeah, so, I was a school teacher for 20 years. I taught in public schools. I taught elementary school, middle school, high school. And I became a teacher because I saw the power that education has in the fight against white supremacy and systemic racism, right? In high school, I decided I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to use education as a tool in the battle against systemic racism. And so after 20 years in the classroom, it was really clear to me that we were missing a set of resources that could really engage students through storytelling and through multimedia storytelling in the history, right? The power of a story, of a well-told story to bring students, to bring anybody, right? And I use the word students sort of globally, right? We're all students of life. The power of a well-told story to bring people into a critical conversation that they might not have known they were ready for. That was the vision that I had, and I started building it when I was in the classroom. I saw how powerful these things could be and the types of learning that students could do through this multimedia storytelling of important moments in history. And so I launched Self-Evident early 2020, and here we are. We've got a library of 10 documentary films, each one with a huge suite of follow-up curriculum resources. We're working with the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture to produce 2 films for them. So it's been a pretty incredible journey so far, and there's a lot ahead of us.
Tell us about your work with the Smithsonian. You were hinting about that when you were coming into the studio, that you have some deadlines up ahead. So will this be part of Self-Evident Education, or is this for the Smithsonian Museum and we'll see them there?
So it will be part of their digital platform, which is called North Star, a digital journey through of some preposition African American history. I got all the rest of it right. So they reached out to us. They were familiar. They became, they saw some of our work, and they wanted us to produce some films for their platform. So we're producing it for their platform, and then, as we work together, the sort of logistics of where it will all live and for how long, we'll work that out. Mm-hmm. But we're producing it for their digital platform, and it should be up next year is the goal.
Very cool.
early next year. Yeah.
Are they
I'm
using
really
any of your
excited.
current material for exhibits that they have?
They do not. They have not used any of our material yet, but that's sort of the hope, is that through this partnership, we can show them how powerful our resources are, and also suggest to them a couple of different ways that they could use them on their digital platform, and then in the museum itself is the ultimate goal. We're not there yet, but we'll get there.
2 more films from Self-Evident Education debut. Is this tomorrow their debut at Smith College?
This is not their debut, but they have not been shown publicly very often.
Okay.
Right? So If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die debuted at last year's or last spring, summer.
Yeah, because we were
Spring,
talking with
right.
you with Acrobatic about it.
Yeah, exactly. So it debuted there. We showed it this past week in Nashville at the Nashville Public Library. And so this is the launch of a program that we're going to do in conjunction with Mass Humanities and then other partners in other states, where we'll do film screenings at libraries, and then with other local partners, like for this one, Historic Northampton, the Smith College Department of History. In Tennessee, it was the Nashville Public Library and Humanities Tennessee. So yeah, this is the launch of this type of programming that we're going to do at public libraries. And part of it came out of thinking about, in some of these places that have passed laws that have scared teachers into thinking that they can't talk about certain things in their classrooms, libraries and other public spaces do not have to abide by those same laws and regulations, right? And so we're thinking about, how do we get these resources in front of people in places that have active movements to keep these resources away from people?
That's Michael Lawrence Riddell, the Executive Director for Self-Evident Education, based in Florence. And tomorrow evening, 5:30 to 7 in the Cower Room at Smith College, The Power of Truth's Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance. One of the films is, we've mentioned before, it's called If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die. And that was co-written, filmed, color-corrected, and composed by Khalif Neville. Tell us about coming across this story and your involvement in the creation of this film.
Yeah, it was like a dream come true as a story brief, because it is basically an action movie plot, but it actually happened. And when I grasped that, I was like, wow, this is not only is it really cool from a narrative standpoint, and with the score that allowed me to stretch out and do some really interesting things, but also people need to hear about this, because it literally is an action movie that actually happened. So
I feel like that's the case with a lot of
for sure.
Black history of about that time, though. When you hear about what these people did to either get free or to help other people, it sounds like a crazy blockbuster.
Think of how long it took to make the Harriet Tubman movie. I mean, that story's just been waiting.
And the fact that
to
Robert Smalls does not have a movie yet, still, that man stole a whole boat.
We could call it Smalls is the illest.
Khalif Neville, though, tell us about the action heroes that were actually from history in the movie that you helped to write.
Yeah, I mean, helped to write is technically true, but I came in later, so
Okay.
I'll say I helped make sure that what this other stuff I was doing would fit in it, but I don't want to take too much credit, because
Okay,
these guys, they really, I mean, even this backstory for how this all started with Peggy, I don't know if we have time to go into that, but that's such a cool story. That's the descendant of the folks, William and Ellen Craft, about
Who we were hoping to have on, but had to cancel at the last minute, unfortunately, sadly. But
Gotcha.
yes.
Yeah, even that backstory to how you got the opportunity to start the project is talking to Michael is so cool, and her being involved in the production was one of the coolest moments of making it. Was remote directing some filmmakers in LA, which is where Miss Peggy, who is the descendant of the folks who the story's about, where she lives. I was we rented them some gear and shipped it to them, and then I was on Zoom trying to be yo, put the light here, no, move it a little bit. Okay, is the audio rolling? It was, I had never thought that's something I'd have to do, but it worked. It came out really good, and it was just, I feel that really brought the whole story together, that there's still that the theme that these people fought for, which was to escape slavery so they could have a family outside of it, that Peggy is the embodiment of that, and it kind of just justifies and made it all make sense. And that was across all the things I did. It was just so cool that it was real, and the music, you know, a lot of times making a score is like fantastical. I love John Williams, as we talk about often.
Yes,
But, you know,
Khalif Neville, of Neville Brothers fame's favorite musician, is John Williams.
I did
And
not
I think that
insist on
says
John
so
Williams.
much. I mean, come on, who doesn't love John
Yeah, I
Williams?
mean,
I tried to invite him to Tanglewood because we almost got to meet John Williams, but it didn't
next
happen. Next time.
But, you know, those are Star Wars is great. It is fantastical, and like that diffuses the I don't know, like the way you have to consider what the score means a little bit, because it is fantasy, whereas this, like, it needed that same drama, but it's real. And like that, like the title, If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die, is taken from what was the kind of the cold open and our central scene where the slave catchers have found where William and Ellen are in Boston, staying with this absolute savage man who, the reason it's titled this is he had apparently dynamite under the like entryway of his house, and when the slave catchers came, he was like, "Yo, you walk in here, I'm blowing the whole block up." And I'm just like, "What? Like, this happened? How did you get this dynamite? Like, what is going on?"
This is in the time frame of the Fugitive Slave Act. It's just been passed. This woman was born of essentially a rape to her slave mother, and then marries a man. And they escape north, and she pretends that the man that she has married to is her slave, and gets her all the way up from where she's left in Georgia, I think, to Boston, right?
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it just exposes some of the ridiculousness of the social constructs that have been created in our culture, right? So phenotypically, she looks white, right, and she puts on a man's clothes and pretends to be not only white, but a white man and a disabled white man, right? And so I think also, you know, at play in this story is this sort of aversion that our culture has to disabilities, right? Where they're going to kind of look the other way because they don't want to be around this, you know, disabled person, and also the construct of gender, right? She just puts on some pants and a hat, and they're like, "Oh, that's a dude," you know, like. So we've got race, we've got gender, we've got disability all at play there, and they get to Boston, and Lewis Hayden and his wife Harriet Hayden, you know, are like, "We will protect you with our lives. We will protect you." And so many instances like that happen. One of the films we're doing for the Smithsonian is about a similar moment called the Christiana Resistance, where people go to these extreme lengths to maintain their freedom, right? And I think that's at that core of what we're doing, is that natural inclination of humanity to be free that Jefferson wrote about, you know, in our Declaration of Independence, and then lived out completely different ideals, right? But he was right that is that natural inclination. It's the natural state of humanity, is to strive for liberty. He just put a whole bunch of roadblocks in a lot of people's way towards liberty.
We're speaking with Michael Lawrence Riddell, the executive director for Self-Evident Education based in Florence, and Khalif Neville, the filmmaker and composer behind the movie If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die. There's another movie that'll be screening tomorrow as well, but we'll take a little break and talk about that on the other side.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Khalees Smith. Our guests are from Self-Evident Education, who are presenting The Power of Truth, Cinematic Chronicles of Racism and Resistance, a free film screening and discussion tomorrow, Tuesday, December 5th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Carroll Room at Smith College's Campus Center. Let's talk about the second film on this bill.
Yeah, so the second film is called A Mother's Bond, and when you watch the film, you'll understand the sort of multitude of meanings of that title. It's about a woman named Catherine Linda, who was enslaved in Savannah, Georgia in 1845. And one of the things that I had never really thought about or done too much research on was what happened when enslavers traveled within the United States, right? So they had a lot of connections between the South and the North, right? They'd gone to school with people. They were friends with these people. They had business in the North. The textile industry, right, is totally dependent on Southern cotton. And so one of the things that I learned more about that would happen is enslavers would travel to the north during the summer months when it was incredibly hot, and they'd come here to do business and have personal connections, and they would bring enslaved people with them to be able to live the lifestyle that they lived when they were in the South in the North, right? So there were these moments when slavery was happening in the North, even though it was abolished, and we sort of envision those two things as totally separate. So that was happening. And then the other thing that they would do is they would bring people with them for whom they had hostages back in the South, right? Because they were nervous. People would get north, they would run. So if they had people back home that they could hold as hostages, they would more than likely go home. So all of that comes to play in this film, A Mother's Bond. We made it based on research that was done by Historic Northampton, phenomenal research that they did into the case of Catherine Linda, a woman who, most people hear nothing about. And one of the other characters in it is a guy named D.W. Ruggles, and she meets D.W. Ruggles, who named himself after David Ruggles because David Ruggles helped him get free, right? So he names himself in honor of this man who helps him free himself. David Ruggles also helped Frederick Douglass get free. David Ruggles is a monster.
And go visit the David Ruggles Center in Florence. Wonderful historical treasure there.
225 Nonotuck Street. Open on Sundays usually for open houses. D.W. Ruggles meets Catherine Linda actually here in Springfield. So they come to Springfield first, and there's a place called Werner's Tavern, which is a stop on the Underground Railroad. She meets D.W. Ruggles. He's like, you could get free if you want. And she's like, yeah, I want that. And her enslaver hears about this and brings her to Northampton, where he tries to hide her. She gets in front of a judge, and then you'll have to come see the film to figure out what happens next.
But when people decided not to free themselves from slavery with this kind of opportunity, then the South would say, see?
Right.
They don't mind.
See, they're happy here.
They're happy.
Right. They chose.
But really,
they
had a hostage at home that they couldn't bear to say farewell to.
Right.
Both of these films have Massachusetts connections.
Yes.
Was that part of your grant from Mass Humanities? Are you intending to focus on stories that land here?
Yeah, great question. So the If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die, that one was funded by Mass Humanities through the Expand Mass Stories grant. And so that one specifically, was about a Massachusetts story, and we wanted to focus on that connection. The Catherine Linda one, I read about her case in the newspaper when Historic Northampton did the work, and we actually produced that one in conjunction with the Northampton Education Foundation and then students in the Northampton Public Schools who served as like our script interns. I could talk about that. I usually cry when I do because it's such an inspiring story, but we can't get into that today. And so most of our stories are meant to be this sort of zoom in on one moment, movement, event, person, or situation that then helps us to zoom out and look for the systemic patterns and what this says about sort of what's happening nationwide. And so it's sort of the same model wherever we are. We've done ones about, Elaine, Arkansas, Chicago, Tulsa, and the race massacre. And all of those, the Trails of Tears and the removal of indigenous nations so that cotton could be grown in that land, right? It's all connected. So every time we look at one moment, we're trying to expand out and see the patterns, right? Because individual stories are just anecdotes if we don't look at the patterns.
Michael Lawrence Riddell from Self-Evident Education. If you are an educator listening to this and you would like to learn more and incorporate some of this into your own teaching, where should people go to find out more?
You would go to selfevidenteducation.com, which is also where you can go to register for tomorrow night's film screening. So again, selfevidenteducation.com.
Tuesday, December 5th, tomorrow, 5:30 to 7 at the Smith College Campus Center at the Carroll Room. Michael Lawrence Riddell from Self-Evident Education and Khalif Neville, who didn't speak very much during this part of the segment, but we are listening. We are listening to your most recent album called 413 in Roman numerals, where there are different amazing Angelo Badalamenti-esque scores that create a sonic landscape to our actual landscape, and I think it's wonderful to listen to.
That's the way to listen to it,
As immersively as possible.
Yes, it's so great. Thank you both so much.
Thank you both so much.
Oh, no problem.
Tomorrow on the Fabulous 413, we bid adieu to one of our favorite musical and cultural centers, Maybe, as we talk with Vitek Kruta and Lori Devine from Gateway City Arts in Holyoke.
And we'll continue to make the Yuletide gayer when we talk about the Queer Winter Makers Market. I'm Clee Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
See you tomorrow.